Okay, it is now 5 p.m. Stay tuned for Revolutions Per Minute, coming up, hosted and produced by the New York City chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, coming up.
Revolutions Per Minute is a weekly radio show from the New York City chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, recorded live at WBAI 99.5 in Brooklyn every Tuesday at 5. RPM is about doing the work to build a democratic socialist future. Every week, hear the latest news, analysis, and organizing experience from the minds and hearts of activists fighting every day in NYC. Join the movement at socialists.nyc.
Yo, what's good, New York? I'm Jack Devine, and you're listening to Revolutions Per Minute, back live on WBAI. We're a socialist radio show and podcast for members of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America. The DSA is the largest socialist organization in the United States, with 56,000 members nationwide, and NYC DSA is its biggest chapter. We are run by our 5,500 plus members and organizers who are working together to build democratic socialism in all 5 boroughs.
My name is Michael Carter, and I'll be co-hosting this episode. A threat to workers anywhere is a threat to workers everywhere. This week, Revolutions Per Minute has 2 very special guests. Karla Reyes is an organizer with Act Now to Stop War and End Racism, an organization formed to combat imperialism and the endless American war machine. She will be speaking out on the military coup that is currently progressing in Bolivia, which forced Socialist President Evo Morales to resign under duress, and is endangering Bolivia's LGBTQ, indigenous, and socialist citizens. Solidarity with the people of Bolivia. Nely Rodriguez is a member of the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, a collective of workers who have been organizing for over 20 years in Southwest Florida, with a model based on leadership development and popular education. They have established networks of cooperatives and won advocacy campaigns that have revolved around securing agreements with private business to ensure basic worker protections. In this episode, we will be exploring how American imperialism relates to the exploitation of immigrant communities and what it means to practice international solidarity. But first, the headlines with Amy Wilson.
Hey, what's up, New York City? This is Amy Wilson for Revolutions Per Minute with your headlines for today, November 12th, 2019. The eyes of the world have turned to Bolivia, where right-wing forces have ousted Evo Morales, the country's outspoken socialist president and first indigenous leader in post-colonial times. Morales has sought refuge in Mexico City, saying, quote, "While I have life, I'll stay in politics. The fight continues. All the people of the world have the right to free themselves from discrimination and humiliation." The international left community celebrated this week the release of Lula, the former metal worker and union leader who served as president of Brazil from 2003 to 2010. Imprisoned since April 2018 on corruption charges widely believed to be false, Lula was released on November 8th and has said, quote, "I am free to help liberate Brazil from the insanity that is happening in this country." In the United States, socialists across the country saw major gains in last Tuesday's elections. Kshama Sawant of Seattle was re-elected to city council against heavy opposition from Amazon. DSA member Lee Carter retained his seat in Virginia's House of Delegates, and DSA-endorsed candidates Kendra Brooks in Philadelphia, Michael Payne of Charlottesville, Virginia, and Javon Sabrina Wheeler of Boston won seats on their respective city councils. Here in New York City, NYPD and MTA's crackdown on communities of color continues, with citizen videos of arrests of food vendors in subway stations drawing widespread outrage. DSA member and State Senator Julia Salazar and her coalition partners organized a rally yesterday outside Brooklyn's Broadway Junction subway station to draw attention to this latest example of the criminalization of poverty in our city. open white nationalist and would-be architect of global fascism, Steve Bannon, appeared this past Thursday in New York City, speaking at the Young Republicans Gala at the Yale Club with Blackwater's Eric Prince and U.S. intelligence officer Tony Shaffer. Bannon declined to show his face outside the event, where a picket line of protesters were gathered to make it clear fascists are not welcome in New York City. Marquise Jefferson died this Saturday of a heart attack at the age of 59. Mr. Jefferson was the father of Tatiana Jefferson, the 28-year-old woman shot to death by a police officer in her Fort Worth, Texas home last month. A spokesperson for the family said of Mr. Jefferson's death, "I can only sum it up as a broken heart." Our love and solidarity go to the Jefferson family and all families reckoning with the trauma of state violence. From the world of labor, a union drive among flight attendants at Delta Airlines, long known for its anti-union sentiment. Delta Airlines, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, is the only major U.S. airline whose flight attendants are not unionized. Association of Flight Attendants President Sarah Nelson says of the drive, "There is a lot of excitement within Delta around AFA. The number of the younger generation getting involved is overwhelming. What we are hearing and what we are seeing is that this next group is not really buying the anti-union rhetoric." Finally, some good news from right here on Atlantic Avenue. Judge Melissa Crane gave the order last Wednesday to restore local control to WBAI after the October 7th coup by a rogue faction of the Pacifica National Board. WBAI has resumed broadcasting its original programming on terrestrial radio and online, while the work continues to revitalize the station and recover from the shutdown, which occurred during our station's fall fundraising drive. From Brooklyn to Bolivia, solidarity with the workers of the world and to all those who are resisting the abuses of capital in their communities. I'm Amy Wilson with Revolutions Per Minute. Now back to the studio for more with Michael and Lee.
We had a last-minute change, and Leah's not here, and I'm Jack Devine. We're just, first of all, we're really happy to be back live, and being on BAI gives us the opportunity to talk about these really crucial issues that are either being discussed in the corporate media in a completely false propagandistic perspective, or they're being told, or they're just being erased, that you're not hearing about them at all. Like the New York Times won't even call what's happening in Bolivia a coup. And so I think it's really critical for everyone right now to be out here supporting the station if you want to see, you want to hear more content like we're doing at Revolutions Per Minute. So now we're going to turn to Karla, who, why don't you just explain to our audience who you are and like what led you to join the movement for socialism?
Hi, so my name is Karla, and I am a public school teacher. I teach at a transfer high school in the city. And what brought me to organizing for socialism was actually teaching. I was working so many hours all the time, and I just kept on seeing my students who were, New York, 1 in 10 students are homeless. Brownsville, that's even higher. And it was seeing students struggling with issues that were outside of the school, but then being told in the school, like, you need to increase their reading levels, you need to do this, you need to do that. Like, I just felt like I was at the bottom of the totem pole, and if I could work myself to death and still not be able to help my students. So I decided it was more important to study, not more important, but just as important to organize outside of school, to really clock out and fight for justice for my students outside of the building.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, I feel like that's such a typical experience I hear, like seeing something in the workplace, like kind of, and especially in a place like a school, it's not like you're just dealing with like worker issues, but you're seeing the weight of society is put onto your shoulder, and you see every day how kids are suffering under capitalism, how their lives are devalued, and then there's a need to transform this society if anyone's going to have a just and good life. So I guess we're going to kind of transport ourselves out of the country for a moment, but I think there's also a clear connection to the United States, what's going on in Bolivia right now. So, like, what is behind this military coup in Bolivia? Like, what is the social base in Bolivia that is supporting the violent resignation, quote unquote, of Evo Morales? Like, who is fighting for that, and who is supporting them, maybe back here in the United States?
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about some context. I know that some folks on the right wing in Bolivia are saying that that Evo is going over his term limits. The Supreme Court ruled the term limits were unconstitutional in the first place, and why we don't uphold the Bolivian Supreme Court as much as we do in the United States is like beyond me, like as if they're not legitimate. So they've ruled that, and then there was a difference between the quick count that happened the day of, which would lead to a runoff if it didn't have a 10-point difference, and then the official count, which came in later. And a lot of Evo's base comes from the rural areas. So those votes will come in later. Like, I was in Bolivia this summer for about a week, and I was coming from the southern part bordering Chile up to La Paz, which was quite a long drive. But also, there's like not many roads. Like, they're building roads. And actually, Bolivia has built about 25,000 kilometers of highways under Evo Morales. So roads are being built and there's an infrastructure happening, but it takes a long time to go from one place to another if there isn't a highway system like there is in the United States. I think that's really important to keep in mind, where Morales' victory is being delegitimized, and the OAS is playing a major role in that delegitimization. But in reality, it's not a dictatorship. It has to do with power and money. Michael Bloomberg literally bought out city council so he could run for the third term here in New York, and no one calls that like a dictatorship. Like, he was allowed to do it and it was totally fine. But when a poor indigenous man does it, all of a sudden he's a dictator, he's this, he's that, when all he's done is work for the poor indigenous folks in Bolivia, which are his base. I was watching some amazing videos of indigenous people from El Alto. And Alto's almost like it's right outside of La Paz. And you see just like people waving the Huipala flag, which is adopted under Evo as the second flag of the country, which recognizes that there are many indigenous communities in Bolivia. It's not just one indigenous people, but there's different flags, there's different peoples, different languages, and it's all a part of the culture. And it's illegal. There's no right to you can't discriminate in Bolivia. When I was out there were all signs everywhere, like, no discrimination is allowed here. And it's just, I guess in the context of what's happening in the last month, this can seem like a major setback for all the people who are fighting against imperialism. But it also just makes me, as an anti-imperialist here within the belly of the beast in the United States, really think about, like, the only way to bring this down is by ending capitalism and imperialism here first, because the U.S. Is really supporting the Bolivian elite and the oligarchs that want to take power back. Bolivia went from a country that had the most poverty in Latin America or in the Americas to having the greatest growth. Like, even The Nation wrote like this big long expose about how Evo reduced extreme poverty in Bolivia. And it's because he nationalized resources. He took back what belonged to the people, didn't allow it to be sold or privatized, and made it a human right to have water and gas, which became nationalized. These things were privatized before Evo.
I think you hit on so many. I just there's so many critical points that you hit on there. I think, just first of all, when you listen to the rhetoric coming out from like Americans and certain media figures, it's so ludicrous for U.S. the people who live in the United States to call another country or government authoritarian when we lock more people in cages than anyone else on earth. We have concentration camps in our borders. Our police extrajudicially execute over 1,000 people every single year. And millions of people in the United States are stripped of their voting rights. So whenever you hear some very self-serious academic who's on CNN, he's like, this is authoritarian, Evo Morales is seizing power. It's absurd. we live in a country where the current president did not win the popular vote. So all of these accusations by the media just are so ludicrous on anything. So do you want to kind of expand on the role that the media in the United States has in propagating a false narrative about what's happening in Bolivia?
Yeah, absolutely. The media, the corporate-owned media here in the United States is like the fourth branch of the government. It really pushes forward the ideology and the ideas of the ruling elite, of the ruling class. The New York Times yesterday said that Evo stepping down was a victory over tyranny. Really, he did it because he does not want his people being murdered. He does not want his people being murdered. The ministers in his cabinet, but also just like the left. In Chile in the 1970s, when Pinochet came into power, a U.S.-backed dictator, the entire left was massacred. Thousands of people went disappeared. Thousands of people were murdered. So that's not, and that wasn't so far long ago. That was like, 40 years ago? Like, people have still lived that. People are still suffering from having lost their loved ones in Chile. And so we know that this is something very plausible that can happen again.
Elliot Abrams is still working in the U.S. State Department.
Exactly. And my family's from El Salvador, so we know also very clearly the stuff that Elliot Abrams pushes forward, the violence that he supports. We know that in 1954, the CIA overthrew Arbenz in Guatemala and massacred 100,000 indigenous people. So the media really picks and chooses like who is a good guy and who's a bad guy, you know? And it's based on whatever's beneficial to the ruling elite that are paying for this. Like Jeff Bezos owns Washington Post. Of course, like he's going to have like a major role in what's being pushed on there. When Morales, Correa, Maduro, they're all demonized, it supports like a public rationale for attacking the people that want to be free, who are fighting for their freedom. Haiti is like it doesn't exist. Like it's been an uprising for in the entire year, and it's just like not there. That's pure racism.
And they're literally killing like protesters, and that's not tyranny, but somehow a democratically elected leader that's supported by the indigenous people is a tyrant. It's just absurd.
So I kind of want to zoom in a little bit. You were talking about the nationalization of resources, and I think that one of the biggest stories that the corporate media does not tell about this is the story of Potosi, which has a history as a silver mine under the Spanish conquistadors, but now has this large deposit of lithium, one of the largest in the world, which is a crucial component to make batteries, to make electric cars, to make all sorts of things. Do you know anything, or what would you like to say regarding, what's the role of international business in this event?
Yeah, I think I saw something that was like, I forget whose, maybe you all know, like someone's stocks went up really high because they're going to,
I think it was Tesla because of the lithium, the lithium battery.
Yeah, the lithium battery. I think it's not a coincidence. At the same time, I don't know too much, but I do know that Evo used, and just like Maduro does, right, like in Venezuela, like the resources, the natural resources of their country come straight back to the people. When I was in Bolivia, I was talking to random workers, like super random people. They did not know I was coming up to them to ask them anything. And I was like, how do you feel about Evo? Every single person said Evo changed their life. That they have electricity because of him. They have a job because of him. And I wasn't talking to any light-skinned Latin American people, white Latinos. Like, I was not talking to them. I was talking to indigenous people, and every single person said that, and that's not a coincidence. Like, I was talking to random folks all over the country. So, the difference is that the resources that under Evo were coming back to the people, and if he could nationalize all of it, he could, and he would, and that's dangerous, especially now that like in Argentina we have a leftist person that won. Chile is really fighting back against Piñera's regime right now. There's like a movement again coming back to the left in Latin America after being like 10 or so years under the some right wing, and that's scary to the U.S. elite. That's scary to the fascist elite also all over Latin America and the world.
Yeah, I think there's the big picture, like the international commodity markets where you have these. Evo was going to nationalize the lithium industry and actually, put it at a fair price rather than sell it at the oligarchs controlled low price. So you have that international capital, the imperialists want to control that resource, and then also on the ground you have these descendants of colonizers, people who have built their wealth and their power in Bolivian society and across Latin America through a racial caste system. And the success of Evo Morales' government in not fully eradicating poverty, but dramatically reducing it to a level that has never been seen in the country before, quadrupling the gross domestic product. Literally, just such an unprecedented success story of a government delivering its promises to its people. And it's actually the success that it's had is the real threat to these fascist gangs. That's the social base of this movement against Morales. Is that a correct assessment, that these are colonizers fighting back for what they stole originally?
That's an interesting way to put it. I guess so. Although I've seen some of the people, like some of the police, who don't look necessarily like the descendants of colonizers. I believe in Bolivia, like, I forget what percentage, it's like over 90% of the population is indigenous. I would put it more as like this ruling elite, which also all over Latin America, but definitely Bolivia, happens to be white. And then the non-white elite, I guess that's a different way to put it, but like that analysis wouldn't hold in a place like Chile, right? In Chile, like, people are a lot more mixed, or wouldn't hold in different places. But I think in Bolivia in particular, because of the deep-seated racism and anti-indigenous racism in particular, I think that it can be seen as true.
Yeah. Then maybe I was painting with too broad strokes. So there's a lot of particular factors to take in.
Yeah, but if somebody wants to be a class traitor and join the side of the working class, whether they're white, like, we'll take them too. Take them and all their resources if they want.
How can, like, we're here in New York, it feels so far away, I think, for most people. They're like, oh, this is terrible, but what can I actually do about this? How can I get involved? So, like, how do people in this city show solidarity with indigenous, LGBTQ, and working class Bolivian people?
You have to. I think it's so important to keep on fighting. I've seen a couple of leftists in different places, like on social media, just feel very demoralized about this, just because Morales and his whole government and what he stands for, like being the first indigenous president of Bolivia and one of the few in the entire world, feeling a little demoralized because of what happened. But this just really should mean that, like, we can only bring it down by bringing, like, the class struggle here to the United States too, by changing the system and ending capitalism and continuing the fight, because there's no winning if we don't fight, and we have to continue fighting. And that's what they're waiting for all over the world. People who are fighting the global South, that's fighting decolonial struggles, really, and struggles against capitalism and imperialism. They're waiting for us here, because within the belly of the beast, that's the only way to bring it down, by bringing down the United States capitalist government.
Yeah, I think that is a really, really important point to make, that we have a certain leverage being here in the belly of the beast, and that it's so necessary to build working class power in the United States, and in particular in New York City, which is the financial capital of the world. So is there any, like, specific event coming up in the next couple weeks that people can go to show their solidarity?
Yes. So the details were just finalized, but at Columbus Circle at 1 o'clock on Saturday, we're holding a Hands Off Bolivia action. The Anti-Coalition, along with many other groups and organizations, are getting together at Columbus Circle and having a rally and a march in solidarity with Bolivia, and with Evo in particular, and also just with Cuba and Venezuela, which will also suffer because of sanctions from the United States to them.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to transition into our next topic, but we'd love for you to stick around. And if you have anything to add to that, we'd be happy to hear it. And we look forward to hearing more from you about the anti-imperialist struggle around the world and here in the United States. But we just want to remind our listeners that you are listening to Revolutions Per Minute on listener-sponsored WBAI in New York City, broadcasting at 99.5 FM and streaming on your favorite podcast app. To connect with us after the show, you can email us at revolutionsnyc@gmail.com or sign up for a newsletter to get links to what we talk about on the show. You can do that at our website, revolutionsperminute.com. www.simplecast.com, and you can also find us at on Twitter at NYCRPM. Today, we're talking about both the coup in Bolivia and migrant worker struggles. And we have a great organization here to discuss the really powerful organizing that they're doing. But before we dive into that, I do just want to highlight how really important it is that we're back live on BAI. And there's been a struggle here at the radio station that is reflective of a broader struggle in media, that there's a fight against independent media. There's a desire for either corporate or sort of bureaucratic nonprofit control. They don't want voices out there fighting against imperialism, standing against capitalism, telling you the truth about what's really happening in our society, the forces that are really making people suffer. And so we're able to do that on a platform like WBAI, and Revolutions Per Minute has really found a home here. And over the past year, we've actually got involved in the station, and what's so unique about a place like BAI is that it has democratic elections. If you are a listener or your staff, you get to vote for the people who are really setting the direction and the tone of the station here locally and nationally. So now is a real time to, demonstrate your solidarity with the station. So if you want to, go to WBAI.com and become a buddy. Not com, org. Sorry about that. WBAI.org. Definitely not a commercial institution. And become a WBAI buddy and say that you've done this, alongside Revolutions Per Minute. You can choose the show that is the favorite thing that you listen to. And I think this would really, demonstrate to the station that there's a need for even more content that's talking about the organizing that's happening here in New York City and around the world against capitalism and for socialism. So now let's tune back to the rest of our show. If Michael, you want to take the lead.
So just like to introduce Nely Rodriguez with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, as well as Yaisi, who's an organizer with them and will be helping us with translation. Nely will be speaking in Spanish because that's where she feels most comfortable, and Yaisi will be translating. Yaisi Solis is her full name. So first, I don't know if I know you guys are here in New York City. I'd love to know a little more about you, where you come from, what brought you into organizing, and what brought you to join the CIW.
Sí, pues buenas tardes a toda la audiencia de aquí, de la radio 99.5 FM. Mi nombre es Nely Rodriguez y yo soy parte del staff de la Coalición de Trabajadores de Immokalee.
Hi, everyone. I would like to first say hi to everyone who's listening on 99.5 WBAI. My name is Nely Rodriguez. I'm a staff member with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers.
Y bueno, yo fui parte también de la industria agrícola. Yo por un tiempo trabajé en los campos de Florida porque ahí en nuestra comunidad la primer fuente de trabajo para la mayoría de la gente de ahí es trabajar en los campos en la industria agrícola.
I'm a former farm worker myself. I worked in the field in Immokalee, Florida, because a large part of our community works in agriculture. When you arrive here to this area in Florida, that's the largest source of work that you can find as an immigrant worker.
Y bueno, por ese fue el motivo precisamente que yo me involucré en la lucha de la coalición durante las juntas comunitarias que se hacen los miércoles para los trabajadores. En esas juntas aprendemos sobre cuáles son los derechos que tenemos al trabajar en la industria agrícola. La coalición cada miércoles tiene las reuniones para los trabajadores y precisamente se hablan de los temas de importancia para el trabajador, como reportar abusos, el derecho que uno tiene también para no dejar que sigan humillando a uno como mujer, que siga pasando la violencia sexual que existía, el robo de salario para los trabajadores.
And I became involved with the coalition through their weekly worker meetings that they have. I was really interested in learning more about my rights and how I could find community in Immokalee, and the coalition gave me just that. We continue having meetings every Wednesday night where we talk about various themes that are of interest to the farm worker community. We talk about how you can report abuses in your workplace and how we as women can now work free from sexual violence and assault, and how we can also work together to ensure that we have basic protections and human rights.
Y bueno, pues por muchos años, ¿verdad? Para la mayoría de la gente, la industria agrícola ha sido formada o ha estado basada en la explotación, en el acoso sexual, en la escasez de derechos humanos para el trabajador agrícola, y es precisamente que de ahí surgió nuestra organización como coalición. El enfoque de nosotros era exigir ese respeto, el que hubiera mejores salarios para los trabajadores, y el enfoque de nuestra lucha es precisamente aprovechar el poder de las corporaciones, su poder adquisitivo, para no nada más que ellos sacaran ganancia de producto que compraran y irse, lavarse las manos, y no les importara las condiciones en cual esas frutas y vegetales son piscadas y son distribuidas a sus negocios.
And our coalition of workers formed because of the exploitation that we were facing at work, because there was rampant sexual violence, because wage theft was something that almost every worker was experiencing, and there was just a lack of human rights protections available to workers. And so the strategy that our community founded was to actually seek the largest power in the industry, go directly with the corporations that for generations had been exploiting their purchasing power and looking to do business where there was the lowest possible price, but not actually doing business when it came to human rights for workers. So we targeted them through a campaign called Campaign for Fair Food.
Y bueno, le empezamos a lanzar una campaña. Empezó en los años 90, la campaña por comida justa, que era precisamente buscar el apoyo del consumidor, hacer conciencia sobre el consumidor, del poder que ellos tenían también para exigir una transparencia en la cadena de surtidores, de donde ellos estaban comprando sus frutas y vegetales, hablar, ¿verdad?, de cuáles eran las condiciones que estaban afectando al trabajador, y aprovechar precisamente su conciencia y el compromiso de ellos para poder apoyar a que surgiera el cambio para los trabajadores agrícolas.
And so we've been fighting for over 25 years, since the early 90s, to increase wages and and to better our work conditions in the fields. And we've been building alliances with consumers across the country, trying to get consumers to understand that we have a lot of power to pressure these corporations to actually sign agreements with farm workers and to take responsibility for these abuses that are taking place in their supply chain. And so we've been building a movement of consumers allied with workers in order to bring about changes in these corporate supply chains.
Uh-huh. Entonces empezamos, ¿verdad?, a usar el poder corporativo para lograr los cambios en la industria agrícola. Hoy en día, a partir del 2011, que fue cuando logramos la primer victoria con la corporación de Taco Bell, que se comprometió a respetar las demandas que los trabajadores diseñamos, 3 demandas que eran básicas para lograr los cambios, como era 1 centavo más por cada libra de tomate que cada corporación tenía que dar, y que ese centavo extra fuera a parar al salario del trabajador. La segunda demanda era que las corporaciones, junto con el Comité de Tomate de la Florida, tenían que comprometerse a que no hubiera esclavitud, a que no hubiera acoso sexual y 0 tolerancia también para el trabajo forzado. La tercera demanda que pedimos era que el trabajador tuviera una voz dentro de cualquier acuerdo, cualquier negocio que hiciera cada corporación con la industria agrícola.
And farm workers placed 3 demands on the corporation that they targeted through the Campaign for Fair Food. The first demand was that the corporations pay an extra penny per pound on their purchases of tomatoes, and that penny be distributed down the supply chain to help increase farm worker wages that had been stagnant for over 30 years. The second demand was that they adopt a code of conduct that farm workers themselves designed that included 0 tolerance provisions for sexual violence and also for modern-day slavery, which were the 2 most extreme cases of abuse that workers were seeing happen in the fields. And the third demand was was that farm workers would have a voice, that they would be able to be a part of the industry in a way that they were respected, and they would be part of these negotiations that the growers would do with the corporations, and that these corporations would suspend their purchases if there was a violation of this code of conduct.
Entonces ya de ahí, a partir, ¿verdad?, del 2011, a partir de que empezamos a presionar a las corporaciones a que fueran parte de este programa, el programa por comida justa, hemos logrado 14 victorias hoy en día. Tenemos apoyo de 14 corporaciones, incluyendo a Taco Bell, a Walmart, Sodexo, Bon Appetit, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, y recientemente aquí en Nueva York acabamos de hacer un acuerdo con una cooperativa, que es la primera cooperativa más grande aquí en Nueva York, que se comprometió también a ser parte de la alianza y que estos derechos humanos se fueran expandiendo para los trabajadores. Entonces de ahí empezamos a ver un cambio, ¿no?, para parar lo que era la esclavitud y el acoso sexual.
And we've been building a large consumer movement over these last 25 years, and we can say that we've won historic agreements with 14 of the world's largest retailers. Through consumer pressure and through organizing, we've been able to secure agreements with Walmart, with Subway, McDonald's, Burger King. There's 14 altogether, and we actually just recently announced the first ever of its kind agreement with Park Slope Food Co-op, which is here in Brooklyn. It's one of the largest, and they are actually going to be buying from fair food farms where workers are being treated with respect, and also educating their customers on the importance of this model and of expanding fair food.
Uh-huh. Y bueno, el motivo por el que estamos aquí ahora es que hay una corporación que es la quinta corporación de comida rápida, que surtía tomate de la Florida, pero que hoy en día cambió sus compras a México. Es la corporación de Wendy's. Tenemos ya 5 años de estar haciendo una lucha y un llamado a Wendy's también para que se comprometa a ser parte de este programa y que pare los abusos que existen en la cadena de surtidores en México, como el acoso sexual, el robo de salario.
We have a campaign right now against Wendy's because they're the only major fast food chain that refuses to join this program. And we've been calling on Wendy's for over 5 years to join this program and to ensure that where they're buying their tomatoes from, that workers are being treated with respect and that there is transparency within their supply chain. And they've been refusing to do so. They've gone so far as to abandon their suppliers in Florida and started to buy products from the Mexican tomato industry, which is riddled with abuse, and there's no regulation for any of those violations, when there's already a program in place in Florida that is protecting the rights of workers. And so we've been calling on Wendy's to join this program and to also ensure that there's no violations taking place.
Uh-huh. Entonces estamos, pues aquí en Nueva York ya es el tercer año que hacemos como acciones grandes para invitar a Wendy's a que sea parte de este programa. El último evento que hicimos, la última acción grande fue el año pasado. Hicimos un ayuno afuera donde está la oficina del presidente de la mesa de Wendy's. Es Nelson Peltz, está en el 280 Park Avenue. Ahí estuvimos haciendo un ayuno con más de 100 trabajadores y hombres y mujeres que estuvimos pidiendo ese diálogo para que comprometiera Wendy's, y no hemos podido tener ese acuerdo. Hoy estamos programando también una acción para el día 18.
We've built a large base of support here in New York City, especially in the last few years. In March of 2018, over 100 farm workers, students, people of faith, fasted for over 5 days outside of the hedge fund offices of Nelson Peltz, who's the chairman of the board of Wendy's. And he and his hedge fund have the power to bring Wendy's into the Fair Food Program. And so we are here to build off of from that fast and from a 2,000-person march that actually took place to end that fast, and we're here because we have an upcoming event taking place next Monday.
Uh-huh. Entonces es una marcha, ¿verdad?, que va a ser ahí también a las 5:30 de la tarde, y estamos invitando pues a todos los radioescuchas y a toda la gente, ¿verdad?, que en este momento esté llegando este mensaje, los que estén escuchando a la radio, que quieran acompañarnos ahí. Vamos a estar a partir de las 5. Bueno, la acción va a ser todo el día, desde la mañana hasta las 5 que va a comenzar la marcha.
And so we want to invite everyone who's listening to join us for this rally in March. We're actually going to be having a full day of protest outside of his office, starting at 8 o'clock. But we're inviting New York City to come out at 5 o'clock to join us for a march that will kick off at 5:30. And I just wanted to add that there's over 60 farm workers that are coming from Immokalee. They're mobilizing, taking 3 days off work to get here. And so as part of the Alliance for Fair Food, we've been doing a lot of work to mobilize consumers here in New York City. We want folks to show up in solidarity with the CIW and their struggle that's been going on for 25 years, but with Wendy's for 5 years. I think it's a critical moment to get people out into the streets and to demand that Trian Partners, which is the firm that manages Wendy's, actually take responsibility for abuses and bring Wendy's suppliers into the Fair Food program.
Seems like a...
So, just for our listeners, what's the date and time again that they should show up?
Que es el día y la hora. So,
and location in New York City?
It's going to be Monday, November 18th at 5 o'clock, and the location is 280 Park Avenue. It's called Trian Partners. We're gathering at 5 and going to be kicking off at 5:30.
It seems like it's, such an incredible organizing project and so impressive. Everything you've been able to do to put pressure on some of the most powerful institutions in the world. So beyond showing their solidarity at this upcoming march, what do you think that socialists here in New York City can learn from your movement and organization?
Bueno, esa es buena pregunta porque precisamente ese es el motivo por el que estamos aquí en Nueva York, para que las personas se enteren de la campaña que tienen los trabajadores agrícolas, que tengan más información. Hay muchas maneras en la cual pueden hacer como unirse a las diferentes marchas y protestas que tenemos. También hay como una petición que estamos haciendo ahorita para que salga una resolución en apoyo al boicot que tenemos de Wendy's. Pueden también unirse con los grupos que ya están organizándose aquí. Hay varias personas que están apoyando a la campaña y también pueden agarrar el contacto de nosotros, y si tienen por ahí alguien que esté escuchando algún evento o una junta o cosas que nos quieran invitar, vamos a estar disponibles, ¿verdad? Porque ese es el trabajo que estamos haciendo, estar haciendo alcance para que más gente sepa del trabajo de la coalición.
So aside from turning out to the protest on November 18th, we are hoping to build a larger network here of people who support farm workers' rights and are constantly working on the campaign for fair food that we have. So there's already a base of people who are energized and working together with us here, and we can build upon that. There's fair food groups across the country, so we're hoping to establish one here in New York City. We also have an exciting resolution in the works that hopefully garners support in the City Council that specifically calls on Wendy's to join the Fair Food Program and support farm workers' human rights. It's actually going to be introduced on Thursday, and so we're hoping that New Yorkers can support that, and hopefully something good comes out of it and Wendy's feels the pressure. That's kind of their world. I would just add that there's also there's solidarity pickets that can constantly be done throughout the year to support farm workers' campaign. And it's not just about Wendy's, right? The goal is to eradicate these human rights violations that farm workers are facing with these legally binding agreements that will hold corporations accountable. And so we're hoping that with Wendy's coming on board, more corporations can do the same, so we can keep expanding this program to protect more and more workers.
So we're going to open up the phone lines. We hope that you'll stick around for this part of the show. We have about, a little bit less than 15 minutes to go. And so to our listeners, we'd love for you to call in at 212-209-2877. Again, that's 212-209-2877. If you want to talk to us about the Immokalee Workers Project, about the coup in Bolivia, about just any movements that are happening here in New York City or the world, or if you just have any thoughts, if you want to talk about what's happening here, the struggle at WBAI and Pacifica and media, we'd love to hear from you. So again, that's 212-209-2877, 209-2877. And this is Revolutions Per Minute, NYC DSA's official radio show on listener-sponsored WBAI. And now we even actually have 4 of us are representatives on the local station board. So if you want to get involved in the station while it's fighting for its life, not just its own life, but fighting for independent community media that is democratically controlled and operated, go to WBAI.org, become a buddy of the show, show your support and your solidarity with the station. We need support in this fight. And I think if you care about, providing a just life for people in the city and around the world, then we all need WBAI. So again, anything you want to talk about, call in 212-209-2877. And while we're waiting for our callers, I think it's just so important to remind people like how much of the capitalist system is built upon your labor, that farm workers' labor is so exploited and it's so people are so poorly treated and I think demonized and erased in our society. So is there anything you want to say that kind of just like reminds everyone that like we're human beings and we deserve support and solidarity and that we're all fighting against the same people that are keeping us all down?
Bueno, sí, también es importante porque la lucha que estamos nosotros teniendo es una lucha de derechos humanos, que no nada más afecta a la industria agrícola, sino que afecta, ¿verdad?, por generaciones a todos los trabajadores de bajos salarios, todos los que hacen el trabajo de piso. Por generaciones no se ha visto con respeto el trabajo que uno hace, la contribución que uno está haciendo con su salario a la economía de este país. Entonces yo creo que es tan importante el trabajo que hacemos como trabajadores agrícolas, como trabajadores de la construcción, como trabajadores de la limpieza, que eso es algo que se tiene que ver ya como una necesidad, como una urgencia de derechos humanos que esté protegiendo precisamente estos derechos al trabajador. Y las corporaciones, ellos están creciendo a nivel global y conforme ellos están creciendo es más la escasez de derechos humanos y es más importante que uno mismo como trabajador se una para seguir luchando en contra de estos abusos.
So these abuses that we're talking about have been going on for generations, and workers have been organizing and fighting to eliminate them for so long. And it's not just agricultural workers, but it affects every low-wage worker in the United States and around the globe. Workers who work in construction or in the garment industry or in housekeeping. These are workers who've been fighting and who lack human rights protections. And while corporations gain more and more profit around the globe, there's less and less protections for workers, and so our model and the way that we've been organizing is so important. It's important to be able to expand that to other workers, not just in agriculture, but also across low-wage industries.
I think that's a really elegant way of putting it. And we have a few callers that are here calling in at BAI. We're back live. We're excited to hear from our listeners. So what's your name and what's your question? Hey, how's it going? You're live on WBAI.
Oh, hi. My name is Mike, and I want to thank you for having representatives from the Immokalee Workers on. I'll definitely be there on Monday. I went there in front of the Peltz hedge fund last year, and my question is, what happens when they do case? Because I believe that eventually you will get those worker protections. A young woman said, the goal is to get, I forget what the exact language was, but, make sure that human rights are observed and protected. But is there any vision beyond that? Work itself, I'm sure farm work, lucky enough not to have done it, I'm sure farm work is alienating just the way that office work is and factory work is, and alienating in different ways, but really still work. And how do we get to a society that people don't have to work in order to survive? The Immokalee workers are doing necessary work to struggle and get gains within the system, but how do we think of it in a longer term project? Thank you for your work, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much for your call and showing your solidarity with these workers. I feel like I'm here almost every week and people hear my thoughts on this, so I feel like your answer to this question will be more interesting to our listeners.
Sí, como no, es muy buena la pregunta porque también nos da el espacio para compartir, ¿verdad?, lo que queremos cuando Wendy's venga a la mesa del diálogo. Esto es básicamente que se abre la oportunidad para miles y miles de trabajadores en la cadena de surtidores de Wendy's, donde sabemos, ¿verdad?, que hay abusos documentados de mujeres que han sido acosadas sexualmente por mucho tiempo, igual que para los niños y trabajadores que han sido explotados en cuanto al salario. Eso es como la oportunidad de una visión de que esos trabajadores que por años han sido afectados en escasez de derechos humanos, pues tengan esa oportunidad, ¿verdad?, de que aprovechen este programa, y también que Wendy's ofrezca a su consumidor unos productos del cual se sienta orgullosos de que están protegiendo los derechos humanos de su cadena de distribuidores. Entonces eso es lo que nosotros vemos en un futuro, que haya unir fuerzas, ¿no?, con esa corporación, y que también nos dé la oportunidad para que cada consumidor de Wendy's pues conozca el programa, y que también hay una transparencia más que nada en su trabajo y en su cadena de surtidores de Wendy's.
So for us, it's a long struggle and a vision for justice and dignity and protections for workers who for so long have been facing these abusive conditions. Women who've been harassed and assaulted in farms, workers who've been, forced to work under conditions of modern day slavery. All of these abuses continue to happen outside of the Fair Food Program. And so our vision is to be able to continue expanding these protections so that workers, not just the workers that harvest tomatoes for Wendy's, but workers across the board are able to access these types of protections. And also to build consciousness among consumers, because we all eat food. And so for us, it's also important that people take into account that when they're buying food from any place that they're buying it from, that it's coming from workers that were not being mistreated. And so for us, it's important to raise that consciousness among consumers, to demand that these corporations take responsibility for what's taking place within their supply chain, and for them to have the peace of mind that the food that they're eating is not coming from workers who've been exploited.
All right, I guess we've got another caller. You're live on WBAI. What's your name? What's your question or comment?
Stephen from here in New York City, and the hardships very visible among these agricultural workers is really us, is all of us, a little less visible right now, but as all wealth and power collects up at the top, the end of the monopoly game type of stuff, and the rest of us go bankrupt as necessarily happens when there's no limit on how rich the rich can get, if you would, how exclusive that power becomes. We've all got a stake in the success of these agricultural workers, in the success of Evo Morales in returning with greater strength to Bolivia, in Lula assuming the rightful place as the leader of the Brazilian people, and the end of the burning down of the Amazon. We're connected with all of that. But there's something very local here, if I may say. The points were made in an excellent way as to the distortion everywhere, but in the story about the coup still unfolding, and the coup may not go the way they think it's going to go, the New York Times and others. A couple of points is that Evo Morales' term extends all the way to January 22nd of next year, of 2020. He received considerably more than 40% of the vote. No one else even within 12% of his percentage. There's no question as to his legitimacy. The head of the armed forces in Bolivia, who comes on television before Evo and says, this man is no longer the president, I'm ordering him out. And Evo must say at that point, or else he's dead right there, he doesn't even come on television, that he is going to leave at this point. Understand that he left Bolivia in a Mexican government military plane, and Obrador's government of Mexico says it had to go rescue him, Morales, because his life was threatened.
I think that's a really, really critical point to make.
It still calls him President Morales.
Absolutely, and I would love to hear more from you, but we're starting to get to the end of the show, and we have time for one last brief comment from another caller we have. Hey, how's it going? Keep it really brief, please. You're live on WBAI. What's your name? What you got to say? Hey, are you still there?
Hello?
All right, well, do we have one more caller, or we're just going to wrap it up? I think we got to wrap it up.
I think the main thing for our listeners to focus on now are the two actions you heard about today. On Saturday at 1 p.m. at Columbus Circle to protest the coup in Bolivia, and on Monday, 280 Park Avenue, which is 49th Street between Park and Madison, and that is at 5 o'clock. And so, thank you all so much. You've been listening to Revolutions Per Minute on listener-sponsored WBAI in New York City, broadcasting at 99.5 FM and streaming on your favorite podcast app. I'm just going to hand it over to Nely for a final thought.
This is actually Yacey. I just wanted to recognize DSA's support for the CIW's work, not only during the Freedom Fast and other protests that we've done here, but for this action as well. It could not have happened without the support of DSA folks here in New York City, but also across the country who've supported the work of the CIW. So just wanted to again say thank you, not just for having us in this show, but for the support that we've received from so many people across the country who identify with DSA.
Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for all the work you're doing. And we'll be back next week live at 5 p.m.
Thanks very much.